Mark Rogers TV with instant analysis of Washington, Stanford, and the Huskies go down 30-22 as a touchdown favorite and the last and final hope, it appears, for the Pac-12 to make the college football playoff. I said a number of times this week and prior to this week that the Huskies' resume was flimsy, it was hollow, it was shallow, and it would not stand the test of time. So the best opponent that Washington has faced in 10 games is now this Stanford team, and they lost it 30-22. Washington's best win to date was against either UCLA or Oregon. Take your pick. Two marginal at best football teams. So the Huskies came out, they dominated up front, which is what you need to do against Stanford and is a difficult task, of course, against the Stanford defensive line that's always stout and tremendous tonight in the long run, with horrible Harrison Phillips just being a man throwing offensive linemen all over the field, disrupting plays and stopping up the gaps between the two tackles. Harrison Phillips is a man-child for Stanford. But early on, it was the Huskies in the running game with Myles Gaskin and company tearing things up. Gaskin had 18 carries for $120 and 3 touchdowns, including the last gasp effort for the Huskies that cut it from 30-14 to 30-22 with about 4.5 minutes to play and gave them a chance to pull off the comeback win. Bryce Love, can't say enough about him. Of course, he was hobbled up and missed the game previously in the loss to Washington State. Probably proved the difference in the game as Stanford lost by 3 in Pullman against the Cougars. And then Bryce Love comes back in this one, and he was stymied for much of the first half, but then started to break free. And one of the last scoring drives of the first half for Stanford was really crucial because the Huskies had broken out to a 14-7 lead. Actually, it was 7-0 at one point, 14-7. Stanford had a drive in which they scored their first touchdown, or actually the game leading touchdown, to make it 17-14 on a play in which it was 3rd and 17, and there was a sack that would have halted the drive on KJ Costello, but there was a face mask penalty, and that opened the floodgates for Stanford to finish off that drive. And Bryce Love had 2 specific plays in which, after he was taken out with the injured ankle, that he re-injured. And David Shaw had said a number of times during the week that he wanted to play that fine line of wanting the competitor to play in the game, test the ankle, but also he knew that it was tender, that it was sore, that he wasn't able to play last week, that the healing had only taken in so much, and that it would be a difficult decision. And Bryce Love didn't look himself in the first half, and much of that had to do with the Washington front seven, which is probably the best in the Pac-12. But in the second half, Bryce Love took charge and ran it 30 times on that ankle, 30 times for $166. And 3 touchdowns. David Shaw said after the game, hey, this is the guy that should win the Heisman Trophy. He doesn't get into awards and campaigning for awards, but that he just had to say that because of Stanford's record at 7-3 and the limited factor that they are right now. I still think Baker Mayfield's the guy that has certainly the opportunity to close this thing out, and right now would be the Heisman Trophy winner. But back to football in Washington, Stanford. Stanford dominated up front in the second half, as they typically do when they are the winning team, and they have created a logjam in the Pac-12 North Division. So I've said it a number of times, specifically in the last couple of weeks, now that the college football playoff rankings are out. I think it's a tragedy within this realm that so much focus goes to the college football playoff in a conference like the Pac-12 now, with everyone with at least 2 losses, the attention taken away from the championship run here. And it's going to be a good one in the North Division with Washington, Washington State, and Stanford, all with 2 losses in conference play. So there's the one big game left, with Washington taking on Washington State for the Apple Cup and possibly the division championship. So we won't go through all the metrics because basically everyone's beaten somebody else. Nobody's got a clear head-to-head matchup over anyone else because Washington State beat Stanford, Stanford beat Washington, and now we've got the Washington State-Washington game on tap. So for right now, Washington State in good shape, but they're going to have to beat the Huskies most likely unless the Huskies trip up elsewhere. And there you go. Stanford wins it 30-22. We'll talk college football playoffs all day on Saturday, and of course have instant analysis of a number of games. We invite you to join us for that. We've had a number of successful runs here on Saturdays, talking up the games as they go final, and ask that you join us on YouTube and the audio on Stitcher, Podbean, and iTunes as well. All right, I'll be back with my predictions in just a few minutes. Again, Stanford puts a halt to the Pac-12's run to the college football playoff. Most likely, there would have to be complete chaos elsewhere. And USC, of course, has the best schedule, but also the most damaging losses against the likes of Notre Dame in particular. So it's Stanford 30, Washington 22, and we will see you next time.